Okay. As we prepare to hear our stories tonight, I'd just like to invite everyone to silence your devices, something I always forget to do, so I just did it. And, oh, no, I didn't. Now I did. Welcome, everyone, to our God's Honest Truth Storytelling event tonight. My name is Pastor Laura Sherwood. I'm one of the pastors here at First Pres Arlington Heights, and we are very glad to have you gathered with us here tonight to hear these very powerful and personal stories. And we are very glad for all of you who are watching online, either on the live stream or later with the recording. Thanks to all of our storytellers for your bravery and your heart to share what's so important to you. And I know it will be impactful for us. Our third storyteller is actually coming here from another event, so I just don't want any worries. She will be here. I'll introduce each storyteller before they come up on stage. But before we begin, will you please bow with me in prayer? Loving and gracious God, we thank you for the many ways you are with us, that you walk with us through our stories. We thank you for the ways you give us strength, for the ways you help us to continue looking ahead, for the companions on the journey with us in the story of our life. Lord, I ask you to bless each storyteller tonight. Give them a strong and sure sense of your presence with them, and be in all of our hearts who are listening, that we may hear the story and listen to its message. May we also hear you through each person's voice. We pray through Christ. Amen. I'd like to introduce our first storyteller of the night, Judy Thorson, and our theme is Untold, Hidden Stories from Our Past. Judy Thorson is going to share a story titled A Good Deed.
I don't know, do I need to move the mic, you guys, or what? I feel like I need to move this a little bit. Okay, are you hearing me now? Okay, good. I'll start. In 1971, my husband, Jim, and I moved to Athens, Georgia, where my husband had a job. And we had been living in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where my husband earned a master's degree in education with a specialty in gerontology. And I worked as head nurse in the newborn nursery at the University Hospital. So we were very excited that he got a job, and we went down to Athens to look for a house, our first house. And the only reason that we could buy a house, that we had money to buy a house, was that in the years that I worked at University Hospital for 2 years, I put money into a retirement fund, and I was able to take that out since I was leaving. So we went down, and we met a nice realtor named Bill Kelly. I remember that name. Isn't that so long ago? I remember. And anyway, so Bill took us and showed us several houses, and we picked one, a very nice house. We were very pleased. And so we were getting ready to go back, and Bill said, I need a check for $500. You can tell how naive I was about house buying. I didn't know about earnest money. And if I don't know if there are any young people in here, it's not $500 anymore if you're looking for a house. It hasn't been for a long time. I bought 4 more houses, and none of them were like that. So anyway, I said, Bill, what if we don't come? He was very nice. And he said, Judy, if you don't come, I will give you your $500 back. But if you come and buy another house, I will keep your money. So we had no intention of buying another house. So for sure, we were going to come. We wrote the check, we signed the contract, and we went back to Chapel Hill to get ready to move. Now, the sellers of the house that we bought were taking with them some of the appliances. So we needed to buy a refrigerator and a washer and dryer. And so we found a used refrigerator and a used washer and dryer. And we made the move. And in 2 weeks, that refrigerator died. Now remember, we had no money. And it was before credit cards were prevalent, and it was before big box stores or anything like that. So we went to a little appliance store in downtown Athens, and we bought a refrigerator and came home with a payment book. I never heard of such a thing. So for a long time, we paid for that refrigerator every month with the little payment book. And so that was nice. And we settled in to our home in Athens, Georgia. Every morning, I would read the paper. It wasn't very big, but I would read the entire paper. Coming from Chicago, it was nothing like reading the Tribune. It was much smaller. But I read everything, as you'll see in a little while. I read everything. And one day in the paper, there was a story about a fire that was in downtown Athens in a little shop. I mean, it was very narrow, probably as wide as that aisle. And it had burnt and wasn't even open yet. They were going to open a store that sold imports, like wooden bowls and candlesticks, vases maybe, I don't know what else, picture frames. Anyway, it was all burnt. That, and also in the same paper, there was a ad for Belk's department store. If any of you have lived in the South, you might be familiar with Belk's. And they were having a fire sale. Now, mind you, Belk's did not have any fire damage. They did not have any smoke damage. They did not have any water damage, but they were having the sale. So we went downtown, and I'll take a sip of water. We went downtown, and as we got out of the car, we walked past the little store, and it was horrific. It was a cinder. And outside the store, in front of the store, there was a burnt bowl, and people were putting money in it. And I thought, well, I could give them some money. I had $5. It was all I had, was the $5. But I put it in the bowl, and we went to the store, and we didn't buy anything. Remember, we didn't have any money before we got there, and now we had even less. And we didn't see anything we wanted or needed. And so we went back home, and when I got home, my neighbor Lucy was in our yard. And I said, Lucy, what's going on? She said, I'm trying to catch this cat because I want to call, it's a stray cat. I want to call the dog, we would have called it the dog catcher back in those days. Now we would say animal control. And so I said, Lucy, I read in the paper. Remember, I read the whole paper. And I read in the paper that somebody is looking for that cat. And she's going to offer a reward. So I went in, I got the paper, I called, and she came and very gratefully took her cat and gave Lucy and I each $5. So, I mean, how often does that happen? You can't count on it happening. But I did a good deed, and it came back to me almost immediately. Isn't that amazing? So I started to think, after I talked with Rebecca, and she offered some suggestions, I started to think, what encouraged me to do that? And I could only think it was my very generous mother. My mother was very generous and always very cheerful. Now, you might say, oh, well, she was generous because she had plenty of money and had an easy life. No, my mother did not have an easy life. She was a child of the Depression, as many of your parents were, and maybe some of you, and you remember that time. Her dad worked in a foundry, and so he didn't always work. And so they they had a hard time. She tells about going to school, and her shoes didn't fit. They lived at Addison and Long, and she walked to school barefoot, holding her shoes because the shoes didn't fit. So that's just an example. But what I really wanted to talk about is when I was 13, my father died. I had a 10-year-old brother and a 2-year-old brother. And my grandmother, who had had a stroke and was paralyzed on one side, lived with us. And I'd like to say that we took care of her. My mother took care of her. Remember, I was a teenager. I didn't do much. But anyway, and my parents owned a small business that my grandparents, my dad's parents, also, the two sets of parents, my parents and grandparents ran the business. And my mother, after my dad died, she and my grandparents ran that business for quite a few more years. So I wanted to tell about her generosity. She didn't have an easy life, and she never had enough money, but she was always very generous with what she had. And I hope that I learned that from her. I want to give you 2 examples. I keep thinking of examples of things that she did, but I'm going to tell you 2 of them. I know you want to go home sometime tonight, so I'll just tell you 2. And they're from later in her life, when she would ride around town. I say around town, it was this whole area. She lived in Niles and used the whole city. And she would always keep dollar bills beside her in the car. So if somebody was collecting, like for the Lions Club, or muscular dystrophy, or the fire department was collecting, she had money to put in their pot. And she always did that. The other example is a little bit different. In 1998, my mother moved to Westminster Place Presbyterian Homes in Evanston, Illinois. And I lived 500 miles away at the time, and so I came a couple of weekends to help. I will tell you, my brothers did the lion's share of the work. My mother, I didn't do much, I came and helped. But I noticed that my mother had 7 angel food cake pans. Now, I will tell you, too, that my mother was a hoarder. She had 5 bedrooms filled to the ceiling. So she was a true hoarder. And we always tried to work that out, clean her out and all this stuff. And so, but 7 angel food cake pans is a lot, even for a hoarder. So I said, Mom, why do you have all these angel food cake pans? And she said, well, every Christmas I make angel food cakes for all the neighbors. She liked to make those confetti angel food cakes. Some of you might remember those. They might still be available. And so I was amused and pleased that my mother, who was 78 at the time, was still able to give to the neighbors. She couldn't make the little cookies she used to make or do some of the other things she used to do, but she could make the cakes. And so she moved to Presbyterian Homes, and she lived there 8 years, and she was never able to do what she just wasn't well enough to do what she had done in the past. But I learned to be generous from her, and that's God's honest truth.
Thank you, Judy. Our next storyteller is Don Bruce, bringing us a story titled, I Stood the Storm. And we can raise this. You want to raise it?
Yeah, I'll raise it. And I don't want it in front of me, so I'll put it to the side. Put that over. I'm not as versed as Miss Judy. I need notes. Okay, so my story is called I Stood the Storms. I recently came across a story about a buffalo in Montana. Officials from that Department of the Wildlife there noticed that when the storms rolled through the area, the buffalo had an interesting response. They didn't run from it or seek shelter. They actually ran into the storm. It seems really crazy, but running into the storm actually helped them. They didn't have to stay in the storm for as long as people would have thought that they would have, because eventually it blew over. I've learned something similar about my life. I faced some storms in my own life that I had no choice, but I had to run into it. So the story I want to tell you is about what it's been like for me and the lessons I've learned from running into the storms. Well, it all started on January 12th, 1968 with me, November 12th, 1982 with Thomas, January 29th, 1989 with Dawn, January 25th, 1990 with Floyd, and January 25th, 1991 with Bathsheba. Y'all heard me right. Between 1982 and 1991, I had 4 kids, and my last 3 kids were stair steps. They were born exactly a year apart to the day. I call them my Wonder Twins. I had 4 kids who were very close in age, and on top of that, I was a single mom. There was often a stereotype about women who had babies like I did, and it wasn't very nice. So for early on in my life, there were storms because of what people thought of me as a mom. There were times when it felt like those storms would destroy me. But I want to tell you how I became a mom by going all the way back to the beginning of my life. According to my mother, I was a little chunky, happy baby. I was full of sass, so much that she nicknamed me Missy. Go figure. I was that kid that always wanted to be clean and cutely dressed. I never wanted to play the regular games that the kids on the block played. If I got one speck of dirt on me, I had to run in the house, wash my hands, and change my clothes right away. And if I didn't, I was one cranky little sister. I mostly played by myself with my Barbies, even though I had siblings. I have 4 siblings total on my mother's side. I fell second to the oldest. As a child, I grew up with just 2 of them, as my mom had the other 2 a little bit later in life. So the 2 I grew up with, Janine and Coris, oh boy, that was nuts. I was bullied all through grade school and high school, but the crazy thing is, the bullying really started at home. Janine and Coris had their fair share of harassing me, and even though they thought it was funny to do so, I was considered the golden child, as I didn't really get in trouble. But nevertheless, they did all the time. And every chance they got, they came for me. However, quite ironically, whenever I was being bullied outside the home, they were always there to protect me, which was really cool. Because it made me feel like, even though in my mind they were torturing me, they also loved me because they protected me. People was afraid of them. So when it became known that I was their sister, I was protected as well. I stood in that storm. But there was more serious storms coming. From a very early age, I was a victim of sexual abuse. It started as early as 3 for me and continued into my mid to late 20s. On top of that, I developed very early and at a rapid pace. I always wanted one of those cute little training bras, you know, the ones with the little pink bow in the middle. That never happened. I went from nothing to boobs overnight. No cute training bra for me. I was in the 3rd grade with a whole real bra, and I felt so cheated. Kids were very mean to me and constantly teased me daily about my big boobs and my puffy eyes, often calling me headlights, fish eyes, frog face. And because of that, I had no self-confidence. It was basically non-existent. Even to this day, my self-confidence is a roller coaster. Some days it's up, some days it's down, some days it's untouchable, other days it's unreachable. I stood in that storm. A childhood of teasing and abuse made me thrive and yearn to be loved. But having no self-confidence, I found love in all the wrong places. I made poor choices, bad decisions. I got into a bad and abusive relationships, and it all led to depression, anxiety, and feelings of loneliness. I stood in that storm too. I had my first bundle of joy at 14 years old. That was a super crazy year for me. Lost my virginity, got pregnant. I got pregnant the very first time, had a baby, and graduated 8th grade. I stood in that storm. My first child, Thomas, he was really special. He went to my 8th grade graduation trip with me to Springfield, because I was 6 months pregnant. I graduated 8th grade at the top of my class. I was voted most likely to succeed and most eccentric. Go figure. Me, eccentric girl? No. The types of storms I endured on my quest to becoming a good mother was full of thunderstorms, tropical storms, tsunamis, hurricanes, twisters, and tornadoes. I stood in all of those. After Thomas was born, I was on my way to becoming a freshman in high school. I was so excited. I had gotten into my dream school, Hyde Park Career Academy. However, that was quickly snatched away from me, as I was advised by Hyde Park that although accepted, they had to reverse their decision, as they didn't accept girls in my condition. What condition? Really? I was pregnant. I wasn't in a condition. I was devastated, but I stood in that storm. I ended up attending an alternative high school for pregnant teens. Once that was done, I had to attend the neighborhood high school, Inglewood. I was so embarrassed, as Inglewood had a reputation for being a school for dummies. But oh, that was so far from the truth. I was and never have been a social butterfly, as I needed to be all about my classes and getting good grades. I had a baby. I had to make it for him, as I was determined not to become a statistic. Because Thomas was born in November, according to the school system, I was a half year behind. So I was never able to be with the people in my actual class. I technically was always 1 year behind. I was determined to graduate with my class. So I worked harder than ever to get all my credits. I took extra classes, I did work study, I went to summer school every year. By the time I became a senior, I was able to be placed in a senior division. But not only in a senior division, an honor senior division. I still remember my division number, 624. And most importantly, I graduated on time in June of 1986. So that storm passed, and I was still standing. But there was more serious storms coming. After that, I joined the military. I went to school. I went to school for computers, child development, CNA, medical assistant, nursing, and I still worked full-time. Even as a single mom, I was building this new life for myself. A few years passed, and I ended up in a relationship that was abusive. It lasted for 7 years. As you can imagine, it was a time when all my confidence that I built was shattered. During that dark time, my second bundle of joy, Dawn Jr., as people called her, arrived. And in my mind, I said, girl, you waited 7 years, what you doing? But oh wait, the next thing you know, here comes bundle 3 and 4, Floyd and Bathsheba. So now here I am, a single mom with 4 kids, and 3 of them are literally babies. And on top of that, the abuse was getting more and more intensely serious. How was I going to do this? Well, when I tell you a mother's survival instinct kicked in and it never left, I still worked, had a full and part-time job, a social life, military life, and I was a full-time hands-on mom. I did not make enough money to do all the things I wanted to do for my kids, so my hustle instinct kicked in. My baby sister China told me once, never to be ashamed of my story and my struggle, as those are the things that gave and give me the strength to be who I am today. So here it goes, my hustle to take care of my kids. I was a dancer, a coyote dancer, a cage dancer, a mud and jello wrestler, a dominatrix. I was arm candy, and I was a neighborhood babysitter and hairstylist. That was one hell of a storm, and I ran right in. I found the power to stand up for myself and leave that abusive relationship once it started to threaten the safety of my babies. I was placed in a victim protection program, and things started to improve. I got a better job. I got a better paying job. And although I still lived in CHA, we were in a really nice row house. So that made me feel like we was doing good. We was on top of the world. And with the help of my mom, in my head, my kids had all they needed or wanted. And although growing up, I didn't feel as if I got all the joy from my mother that I wanted, she did give it to her grandkids. And for that, I have always felt eternally grateful. That storm had passed. The thing I worried most about, though, at that point was the future of my kids. As a single mom of 4, working 2 jobs, side hustling, and living in the projects, I only wanted to give my kids a good life, but a better life. I was sick with worry about the gangs getting a hold of my boys and terrible things and bullying happening to my girls. I wanted and needed a better life for them and a chance to be successful. My oldest, Thomas, ended up graduating valedictorian of his 8th grade class. He was offered a scholarship for a high school named Mooseheart Child City and School in Aurora. Now, I've never heard of this place. It's essentially a boarding school. And once you graduate from there, you get a 4-year scholarship to college. My heart jumped out of my chest. I agreed for Thomas to attend, and during their home visit, the unimaginable happened. Mooseheart offered me a scholarship for all 4 of my children. Could I send all 4 of my children away to school? I thought to myself, this is my only way for them to get out of the hood and have a chance. I accepted, they went, and they are now successful. That was a crazy storm. The struggle of separation for us was real. And as the young adults say, life was lifing. I still to this day harbor guilt about my decision to allow my kids to attend Mooseheart. As in my mind, the school was more of a parent than I was. But they all turned out the way that they all turned out makes me very proud. They are all successful in their own way. And so I stood in that storm, and I passed, and it passed. My journey through life as a single mom was at times a vicious storm of hard choices and heartache. I didn't always do the right thing, and I lost a lot in some of those storms. I endured physical beatings. I lost myself. I had miscarriages. 2 of the miscarriages were the twins of both Floyd and Bathsheba. My heart lays empty for those babies every day. There were times when I thought the storms might destroy me, but becoming a mother was and is the most single, joyful, wonderful part of my life. Although I didn't get mothering correct all the time, I never stopped pushing and striving to become a better mom than I was the day before. So how did I stay standing in the storms? How did I figure out that I had to start running in the storms? There's this cliche about a mother's love that can lift a person through anything. That is certainly true for me. But for me, the love that I have for my kids, the love that can only come from being a mom, made me see that all the things I never dreamed I could do before me, when having no confidence threatened to blow me down, my love for them forced me to dig deeper and see that I could do so much more than I thought I could. Those storms helped force me to be strong, and they showed me I was capable. The storm helped me stand. Now, who knew in the spring of 2003, I would gain 6 bonus kids, along with my now wife, Lee. Lee and I met on Yahoo Personals. Good tidbit for y'all. She was a mom of 3 of her own. She was a mom of 3 of her own, and 3 more she was raising, who were her cousins: Ryan, Jasmine, Jordan, Tanika, Tevin, Catherine. My world changed, as in my mind, I now had 10 kids, not just 4. And I wasn't raising them alone. We were moms together. Being a bonus mom has storms just like being a birth mom. You always want what is best for your kids, but your idea of what's best is not always their idea of what's best for themselves. I worked hard on instilling my vision of life on them. Some days are harder than others, but the joy I have in my heart today to have been able to be part of their journey to adulthood is breathtaking. My view was not always in line with Lee's version. However, I secretly hope and pray in my heart that part of me lives inside of them now and forevermore. For all 10 of my kids, I always and forever only want what's best for them, their happiness, their success, whatever they might look like individually. My decisions and actions may not have always been good, right, or correct, but have always come from the deepest core of my heart. But with every storm, my love grows, and I dig deeper and deeper to see how strong we all are. Me knowing that fact allows me to know and understand. The storms continue, but I run into them now. I stood the storms.
Thank you, Don, for sharing that powerful story. Is Chris here? There she is. Our third and final storyteller of the evening is Chris Ward with the story titled, "If at First You Don't Succeed, Ring, Ring, Ring Again."
Down too. Then you can see me. All right. So before I came here, I was doing my other passion, golf. So I am in my golf attire. Thank you very much. All right, so how did I become a solo handbell ringer? Well, I think it all started back in junior high, 8th grade to be exact, when I first learned how to ring handbells. I'm originally from Iowa, and I grew up going to church at First Presbyterian of Waterloo, even though we lived across town in Cedar Falls, about 20 minutes away. I was already active in our church youth activities, plus active in Rainbow Girls and Junior Achievement, as well as music in school. Music had always been a creative outlet for me, a way to step away from my logical side and be able to express myself. I also liked being active and proving I could do anything I sent my mind to. One Sunday after church, Miss Sally, our local handbell choir director, came up to me and invited me to join the senior high handbell choir. Now, I already played the piano and the clarinet, so I knew how to read music, but I had no idea how to ring a handbell. How cool would it be to learn a new instrument? Now, I was super excited about doing this, but then I also knew that it would mean that my parents were going to have to drive me across town to yet another church activity. But that turned out not to be a problem. One of the other ringers, who lived pretty close to me, knew how to drive, and she was willing to pick me up and take me to practices. So I joined, and I loved it. What a great confidence builder for an 8th grade girl to be playing handbells in the senior high handbell choir. I played with the handbell choir all through junior high and high school. Then I went away to college, set that skill aside for a while. Now, fast forward a few years. I moved to the Chicago area to work for Accenture, Anderson Consulting at the time, after getting my MBA from the University of Iowa. My boyfriend from graduate school had just recently broken off our engagement, and I was trying to figure out where I fit, since I didn't have any family in the area. So I decided, like a lot of young adults, that it was time to go back to church. I found First Pres of Arlington Heights and started attending the fall of '96. Once there, I connected with the Just Friends social group and learned more about the church's music program. I realized they had a handbell choir. So I joined immediately. Now, I was also talked into joining the chancel choir because, well, you know, you're here on Thursday night, it's right afterwards, you might as well stay and sing in the choir. And so I did. One Sunday in early '96, I was helping Joe Christian sort through and organize all of the handbell music that was in the handbell music cabinets. While we were sorting, we found a piece of solo handbell sheet music. Beneath the Cross of Jesus by Christine Anderson. Now, I don't remember exactly how it happened, but somehow I decided I wanted to learn how to play it. At that point, I hadn't actually ever seen anybody perform a handbell solo, so didn't really have any idea what it entailed, but I figured, all I have to do is learn the music, so why don't I go ahead and give that a try? During the summer months, First Pres had soloists and small ensembles, which provided special music when the choir was off, just like we do today. Joe and I decided to sign up to do special music and picked August 25th. I was getting married in June, so that gave us time to practice and get ready after I came back from our honeymoon. We used the church's handbells to prepare 2 handbell duets, and I prepared the solo. We also need an accompanist for these, so we asked my friend Carol Freeberg if she could be our accompanist. Carol would continue to be my accompanist for as long as I was playing handbell solos until she was no longer able to play the piano. Joe and I played both services that day, and I honestly don't remember a whole lot about it, other than some of the comments I heard after the service, like, "You did a really nice job." And actually, my personal favorite, "You looked really scared." Well, comments like that don't really help build your confidence, so I decided solo handbell ringing probably wasn't for me. So a few more years go by, and in 2004, my husband at the time and I moved to Eagle, Idaho for his job. Eagle is a suburb of Boise. I agreed to that move on the condition his next career move had to come bring us back here to Chicago. My last time singing with the chancel choir before moving was Christmas Eve 2003. The last song the choir sang that night was Hallelujah Chorus. I love singing that song. But that night, I couldn't sing. I was in tears at the thought of leaving my choir family and all my friends to start all over in a new city. Luckily, I was able to convince Accenture that I could do my job remotely, something totally unheard of in those days, which is totally commonplace today. So I was able to keep my job and work from home. But now, I had to figure out how to meet people. So I decided I would go and find a new church home. The initial Presbyterian church I tried was in Eagle, close to my home. I ended up sitting in the service next to the mother of a boy I dated in high school back in Cedar Falls. What a small world. Now, this church had a chime choir that was playing that day. Chimes are not handbells, but it was something. So after the service, I went up to talk to the director about being a member of the chime choir. She informed me that she required anyone who played in her choirs to be a member for at least 6 months before she would consider allowing them to join. Whoa. Even though, exactly, even though I would have known someone from my hometown in that church, it just didn't really feel like a good fit for me. So I kept looking. The next church I found was First Presbyterian Church of Boise. First Presbyterian of Waterloo, First Presbyterian of Arlington Heights, First Presbyterian of Boise. Seemed like that might be a pretty good fit. It was in downtown Boise, about 20 minutes away. So on a snowy Sunday morning, I decided to give it a try. Unfortunately, once I got downtown, I couldn't find any place to park with all the snow still in the streets. Boise doesn't get a lot of snow, doesn't even get a lot of precipitation, about 11 inches per year. So, and because they're on a high plains desert, so they don't really know what to do with that. It all goes up in the mountains. So I looked around, I eventually found the church parking lot, and as I was parking in the very last spot, I saw a sign. Parking for church members only. All other cars will be towed. By that time, the service had already started, and with no place to park, I just went home. Now, a couple Sundays later, and no snow, I decided to try again. This time I found on-street parking right across from the church. The service was lovely, the congregation was welcoming, and they had a small choir. After the service, I went up and talked to the choir director. Yes, I know I have a problem just going up and talking to people. She was very excited to talk to me and invited me to sing with the choir the next Sunday. Now, they didn't currently have a handbell choir, but we're thinking about starting one since they did have handbells. Well, I joined the choir, sang the next Sunday, and helped start the adult handbell choir. Few more months go by, and I'm enjoying being a member of the choir, one of only 3 sopranos, but a ton of altos, and also being the co-director of the Riley Ringers Handbell Choir. All was going really well, and I felt like I'd found a new church home. Then, one Sunday, we had special music as part of our service. Now, I'm sure you can guess what I'm going to say next. Yes, our special music was a local handbell soloist named Phyllis Tincher. She was mesmerizing. Just the way she played the music and the way you could watch what she was doing. You could feel the emotion that she was putting into her songs. I'm more of a visual learner, so what she was doing really resonated with me. And while I was sitting there absorbing everything she was doing, a thought crept in my head. I started thinking that maybe, just maybe, this is something I could do. I continued to watch her and watch what she was doing. And by the time she was done playing, I was like, I'm sure this is something that I can do. So I went up and talked to her after the service, because that's what I do, to learn more about how she'd gotten started playing solos and if she had any tips for someone who might be interested in learning how to be a handbell soloist. She was very, very gracious and answered all of my questions. So, with her guidance in mind, I pulled out my only piece of solo handbell music, Beneath the Cross of Jesus, and this time started to learn how to play it again. But I understood more about what it meant to be a handbell soloist. And I had someone that I could model my experience and playing style after. So on February 26th of 2005, I played that same solo again as part of our Lenten music and meditation series. No one told me I looked like I was scared. And so a handbell soloist was born. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And I'm not sure how many here have actually been able to come for one of Chris's handbell solo performances. So if you've never seen it, it really is mesmerizing. 2 tables, I think, or 1 table of bells. 3 tables of bells played by 1 person for the whole song. It's really amazing. Thank you to all of our storytellers for sharing your stories about the lessons of generosity, the strength of a mother's love, and the call to something that built confidence and brought joy. Thank you all for listening. We invite you all to join us for a reception in the parlor. All of our storytellers will be there. Please come up and talk to them just like Chris does, and ask them more about their stories and have some fellowship with one another. May you all go out into the rest of this evening with God's peace. Thank you. And let's give them all another round of applause.